Hello and welcome. My name is Emily Prieto, and I'm the co-host of the Seeds of Tao podcast alongside my husband, Joshua Prieto. We're also the co-owners of the Seeds of Tao education platform, an incubator for regenerative entrepreneurs. If you're new to the podcast, this is a podcast for impact entrepreneurs creating regenerative enterprises. We often get asked what exactly a regenerative enterprise or impact entrepreneur is. So if you're wondering, a regenerative enterprise builds triple bottom line profits through the practice of ethics and principles that lead to a more inclusive, fair, and balanced economy. Impact entrepreneurs, or regenpreneurs, as we sometimes like to call them, are those willing and able to take on the financial and personal risks of starting and building regenerative enterprises. You'll get to know exactly what all that means as you join us for this and future episodes, but know that we welcome everyone to join us as we work to build regenerative economies together. That's exactly why we are here doing what we do at Seeds of Tao. Our mission is to help establish regenerative economies in every bioregion by serving individual regenpreneurs like yourself. In this podcast, you'll hear the startup stories in all their glory from impact entrepreneurs all over the globe. You'll learn and grow the skills of building a regenerative enterprise from your peers, mentors, and leaders. Finally, we'll get to know each other as you engage in the podcast and join the wonderful Regenerative Business Economies Network, aka RegenBen, an open community where peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenpreneurs come together to build and the regenerative economies of the future. Join us every month for a wonderful episode as we collectively move beyond sustainability and into our regenerative future. It all starts now.
Hello and welcome to the Seeds of Tao podcast. I have a special guest on the air today. We have Thomas Richardson of Gaia on the air, and we're going to be talking about his journey as an entrepreneur and the things that he's learned. But yeah, it's great to have you, Thomas. How are you doing this afternoon for you? It's morning for me.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Yeah, it's a great life.
Awesome. Well, great to have you. We're going to start it off in the same way we do every time, but what got you up this morning? And then as a follow-up question, what gets you excited to do the work that you do?
What got me up this morning? Incontinence. Not mine. My old Rottweilers, okay? Just for the record.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what gets me excited is optimism, being optimistic future, optimistic for the awakening that's taking place around us, and the feeling of hope that whatever energy was put into destroying her is now being changed, and we can put that into regenerating her. That's and I get really excited and quite nerdy about it. Yeah.
Well, I like that, and I like the nerdiness factor of that, because there's so much that you can really like get your sink your teeth into when it comes to regeneration and how interconnected the systems can be, and that gets me excited, right? I get nerdy about the different systems. What gets you excited with the systems side of things, or with the nerdiness, I should say?
I suppose the nerdiness is looking at the advancements in technology and how they can be utilized. Which is really cool. I mean, all the Earth observation stuff and the capability now of the satellite systems that we're getting access to with regards to monitoring and verification is really exciting. And for my part, it's how do we create systems on the ground that can take that digital and almost make it analog, if you like, so we're trying to bridge the gap. This whole regen space now is, I mean, what we're facing here is the monetization of nature, and that's a real double-edged sword. On one side of that is corporate land banks, but the other side of that is indigenous groups and smallholder farmers in the developing world being able to capitalize on regenerating their land, and that's the bit of it that really excites me.
Giving the power to people that the power has been stripped away for so long, because they saw the value early on of what natural capital is, and we just took it and pillaged it essentially into these extractive and exploitative systems, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, look, so a couple of projects. We've got one in the Philippines, for instance. We've one in Northern Cameroon. These are all test plots now. This is I'd say it's a late stage startup is where I'd like to say it. I mean, we can't be in beta forever. Mm-hmm. And we have a project in Ireland. So they're three very different landscapes, if you like. And what we can see over and over again, and especially in Africa, is that there's been kind of this Western model of agriculture that was imposed on them, and they were sold a pup, really, that they were sold that, these small scale farms could tap into these commodity markets, whether it's like soy or peanuts or whatever the cacao or whatever the commodity is. But actually, that hasn't worked for them. They've been tied into this system. There's a downward spiral of chemical fertilizers and land degradation. And actually, the original systems, I mean, these lands supported, maybe not the numbers that we have now, but they supported indigenous land use practices for millennia. And so what we're doing really with a lot of regeneration, and we have to openly admit this, is that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're looking at the history books in a way, and we're saying that, First Nation Americans, they grew the Three Sisters for thousands of years on the same plots, because there was symbiosis. So what we're doing really is just reinvigorating that. And for my part, the system that we're developing here is about generating funds that catalyze that regeneration and give people the resources to be able to regenerate their land, but using their practices. I mean, I'm not going down into any of these spaces and telling these people how they should and shouldn't manage their land, because they know. These guys know. They know that if their earth is bare and they're putting these chemical fertilizers on it, that after a certain amount of time, these toxic salts are going to build up. It's going to piss rain. It's going to wash away. Their watersheds are being damaged. Their wells are being polluted. They know this. But unfortunately, they're caught in this cycle. A prime example of it is your artisan gold mining on the west coast of Africa, where, it's like they get up every morning, and unless they go and mine and get that little bit of gold or that cobalt, they've no way of feeding their families that evening. And so they're caught in this vicious cycle, Whereas if they were actually given the resources to take a breath for a minute and then restore the land, and then the land went back to abundance, do you think they want to be out there mining cobalt and gold? No, of course not. Of course not. They just don't have the resources to actually catalyze that. So the platform that we've developed, we call it Geo Blocks, and it's catalyzing regeneration. And we source funding from various different, from pretty much any product or service this can be used on. And that money goes towards catalyzing the regeneration. And then we monitor it and we verify it, and is an extremely transparent platform. The whole idea behind it is that it's so transparent and verifiable that if anyone wants to take a look at it from whatever way they're looking at it, whether they're scientists or whether they're earth regenerators themselves, take a look at it. If you've got an issue with this platform, call it out. Let's fix it.
Well, that's the way we need to do business these days. We need to really integrate it with as many systems as we can in order to be able to make it regenerative and turn it
absolutely
into a regenerative
collaboration,
system.
Isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So tell me just a little bit more before we dive into, because I really want to get to how you as the entrepreneur, Thomas, got involved in this work. But before we do that, let's explore, just help me and the listeners understand a little bit more of this model that you're creating. So someone comes in, what's your ideal client? Who are your ideal partners in this, and how is this coming together?
Okay, so initially we focused on, with regards to getting funds, we focused on the events industry, the whole events sector, because part of my background is in the festival scene. And I have friends in the festival scene, and in particular, one friend, he's a shareholder in a small music festival in the UK, and they were like, look, let's get on board. And so for this year, it's actually the 25th of May, so it's in a couple of weeks, we're going over to the festival. Every festival ticket they sold has one of our little QR codes embedded in it that's blockchain, that's on the blockchain, and that represents 1 square meter of land regenerated. And so when they scan that QR code or activate that QR code by touching it or scanning it. It takes you through to this interactive dashboard. All the information about that project is uploaded onto that dashboard. I mean, we literally go down to the pay slips and the stories about the people involved. It's got all this information, but it's also connected to several different monitoring systems as well. So you get all the updated information, and that's continually updated and monitored. The projects that we look at, pardon me, would be more along the lines of degraded land. Now, we're being offered the whole time opportunities to protect existing forest. And while I agree that needs to be done, for my part, I would like to focus more on the additional stuff that, let's focus on the heavily degraded areas, and by regenerating them, and especially if we can regenerate land and put in agroforestry systems that offer the same forest products and services that the forest is offering, then we can take the pressure off the forest. And also utilize the forest itself as a resource, but not one that we extract from, as in slash and burn and cut it down. But for instance, in the Philippines, we're regenerating an area that's around a sacred forest. The forest itself is still pristine, but it's being heavily encroached on all sides. So what we'll do is we'll go into the rainforest and we'll extract seedlings from the rainforest, but you take out the little chunk of soil and the mycelium and everything comes out, and then you propagate them on site and they're planted on site. So, and the same in Africa. So in Cameroon, I mean, we're talking northern Cameroon, heavily degraded. I mean, just the scope and scale of it is heartbreaking, to be fair. It just goes for miles and miles and miles. It's just brown dirt, and the wood's covered in forest at one time, or maybe not all forest, but pastoral lands. And also, we have to be aware that we're not just planting trees here. That we're looking at entire ecosystems,
right,
and
grassland restoration.
Ecosystems weren't necessarily covered in trees. So the projects we get involved with are generally small-scale projects for small-scale landholders or indigenous groups. And that's what we're aiming at. But again, like I said, we'll be focusing on the heavily degraded stuff.
Yeah. So regenerating these lands that have been overused and extracted from for a long period of time, and finding ways to regenerate them. I think that's wonderful. I also see that the event space is a really interesting way to go about this as well, starting off, right? Because you could do so much with big events. Often have a huge impact on land a lot of times, right? You look at
absolutely
some of these really big venues that are outdoors and whatnot, and by the end of them, they're just a massive trash pile, right? I think there's also that opportunity, like Burning Man, I know is kind of this interesting place that people go to and festival that people, but they're trying to be really mild on the land. But what if at the same time you could not just leave no trace, you could actually improve the space, right? That Absolutely. a event has been. So I don't know. I think there's lots of potential for something like this, and I really enjoy that. If I go to, correct me if I'm wrong. If I go to this event and there's this QR, I can track that for the life of that project and beyond. Is that
absolutely?
Is that kind of,
absolutely.
Okay.
So initially we're looking at 25 to 30 years, because I believe that after 25 or 30 years, if a project is still viable and functional after 25 or 30 years, I think we can assume that we've built longevity into it. Unless
something comes along to mess up what has been put into place.
I think honestly, I feel the way that we're moving, the conscious shift that's taking place, and the way that humanity is moving. Look, in the next couple of years, as far as I can see it, we're all either going to be living on an irradiated dust bowl, or we're going to be living in the start of the Garden of Eden again. Because she will regenerate, man. You know, like if you just leave it alone or just tend it or just interact with it, you know, nature is awesome. I can see it here. Just
very resilient.
My own place here, for instance, I live in Southern Ireland, very beautiful part of the world. Blessed to be here. And we have a small holding here, only a few acres. We keep a few rare breed cattle and with big vegetable gardens. But a couple of years ago, there's our semi-state body, which is called Quilcha, and they're a Sitka spruce plantation, as my friend calls it, vertical bog roll, as in toilet paper.
Okay.
And I purchased a bit of land that was adjoining me. It was only a hectare, and it actually had a mixture of Sitka spruce and eucalyptus on it. And they took the trees away, and what they left was it had 3 rotations of Sitka spruce on it and a couple of rotations of the other stuff on it. The land was just destroyed, and when they'd finished with it, it was literally like clay with pebbles on it. Okay, and so we went in there and we pulled up the stumps and we rearranged it and put banks around it and put a couple of ponds. And I got hold of a couple of hundred oak trees, and I planted some native oak trees on it and stuff. And then kind of just left it. I had a motocross track in it because I like to motocross and mountain bike. And so I was practicing in there for a while. A few people broke their bones in there, so we decided. But the whole idea behind it was that eventually we would close it up and just let nature take back over again. And an awesome thing happened that all of a sudden the heather and the gorse, I mean, these are all probably, I don't know if you know these plants, but they're all like, they would be considered pioneer species. So the heather and the gorse started to take over, and then these little seedlings started to migrate in, the mountain ash and stuff. And this is we're about 6 or 7 years in now. And an awesome thing where I planted the little oak trees and there was no gorse and heather growing. The little oak trees are still little stunts, but wherever the gorse and the heather grew, these are like 12, 14 foot high trees now. And it just is. And now there's little newts living in there. There's frogs living in there. We've ground nesting birds in there. There's hedgehogs in there. And this has done it itself. Like, you know, I can say I planted the 100 plus oak trees, but to be fair, if I hadn't have done it and all I did was just close the gate, nature would have done that itself, you know. And now I can go in there and interact with that. We did put in some apple trees and things now that the ground has got a little bit better. But there's places I can go in there now and I can knock back the gorse, for instance, that's remediated the land, and I can put in some nut trees and some fruit trees and things like that. And so just the power of regeneration, you know. So I think this whole thing that we have to invest heavily in it and work hard at it, what we really need to do is we need to give it a chance to breathe. And the people that are putting pressure on it, we need to give them the tools to be able to take a step back and just help it, you know. Really, that's what it boils down to, man, to be fair.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where we have, I think, the hardest time. It's the people problem, right? We have to, our current systems are putting so much pressure on things. And we need to find ways that we can allow nature and learn from nature and allow those systems to kind of take root again, and use them in beneficial ways. Empower
people to be the keystone species, man. We are the number one keystone species on this planet, no doubt about it. But we've been sold a pup with the whole fucking scarcity extractive model. Is bollocks. We've been sold a pup. What we need to do is we need to switch over our brains to the abundant regeneration model. And I believe that's what's happening. Now, there are powers that be that have a vested interest in that extractive model, but they're all old men now. George Soros's and the fucking Bill Gates of the world.
Yeah.
They're dying out. They're dying out. They're a dying breed. And with them is dying that old mindset and that old paradigm. But people need to wake up, and people need to realize that they have been sold a pup. And the sooner people start to wake up, and I think that's what's happening here. That's why me and you are having this conversation, Josh, because
exactly
because we're at the vanguard of this. It's awesome. It gets me up. That's what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah. Many of us will wake up because of the dogs too, so that's life.
Let's take a moment for a brief promotional break and talk about the state of our world. There are famines, floods, and fires in our backyards, a global recession affecting our economies, and war and conflict tearing down our relationships with one another. You see it in the news, feel it in your wallet, and talk about it in your social networks. It's hard to think that it doesn't affect you in your personal life and bring you down in your work. Except you want to regenerate our lands, turn our economies into circular ones, and do it in collaboration and community with others. How are you supposed to do that when it seems like everyone's working against you? You're an entrepreneur and you have a business that's going to help us solve these problems and bring these solutions? You're telling me you're going to change people's minds and raise capital for your cause and bring in triple bottom line profits? You must be an optimist, a dreamer, or completely out of touch. Who's going to buy your products or services, take you up on that offer, or help you fund your do-good business? We will. Who are we? We are the Regenerative Business Economies Network, a connected group of impact entrepreneurs, peers, colleagues, funders, allies, and supporters of regenerative enterprise building. Together, we take on the financial and personal risks of building regenerative enterprises. It's all of us together that creates the change we want to see. We must believe in each other and the work we've devoted ourselves to. If you want to be supported and also lend support to impact entrepreneurs like yourself, follow the promotional link in the podcast description or head over to seedsofdao.com and click on Join the Community. With that, let's get back to the episode.
Let's dive into the story of how you kind of came into this, because that's really what we want to share on this podcast. A lot of times we want to see how entrepreneurs in this field get involved in this work and do something with their passion, right? And we can see that you've done that, Thomas. So tell us how you got involved, where this all started, and take us back to how this came to be.
Well, it all started a long time ago. I come from a very eclectic background. Okay, for the first 20 plus years of my life, I was raised as I was born at the side of the road, and we were horse-drawn gypsies, and we travelled around with horses and wagons, and we did the festival scenes, and we used to pick fruit in the summer for a living, and we'd squat in farms for the winter and stuff like that. We moved to Ireland then when on my 7th birthday, actually, which I'm 47 now, so 40 years ago. And we travelled around Ireland with horses and wagons. By the time I was 13, I never went to school, by the way. So that was one side of that. My parents thought it wouldn't be worth sending me to school. I don't know whether I had any to offer to society anyway, but so I never went to school until eventually at the age of 13, we were camped in Cork City, which is our second biggest city here, in a real rough part of town. I was being delinquent, getting into lots of trouble, got picked up by the authorities, and I got stuck into a school for delinquents and runaways. But I ran away from that, and I joined the circus, and I worked with various different circuses. I lied to them about my age, and
Wow.
worked looking after elephants and lions and tigers and all different various things. And then after that, I was living rough for quite a few years as a young teenager, just traveling around and bumming about. And then the age of 23, I traveled down actually at 19 is kind of the catalyst of the first start of me, kind of the new Thomas that had grown out of this traveler background. I went to India and I just fell in love with India and traveling. Mm-hmm. Came back then, went down to Spain, started building gardens in Spain. I was just in a pub one day and this expat overheard us talking, and he could hear we were from Ireland, and he was like, you boys are Irish, you can build stone walls. And I was like, yeah, here, give us a job. So I started building gardens, came home, and it was just at the start of the economic boom here for Ireland, late 90s, early noughties. And I set up a landscaping firm and was building gardens right up until 2007. Then we had the crash, but I've been very frugal. I bought this place and built a house, but I've also got a passion for music as well. So I built a recording studio here. And so for a few years, we were doing a recording studio, met a beautiful woman, had a couple of kids, and then had to go back to doing landscaping because being a party boy and making music wasn't paying the bills. And I had to grow up at that stage. And was doing that for a couple of years. We did some real nice stuff. Got into building these biodiversity classrooms for the Department of Education here, and was always had an ear for and a passion for biodiversity and nature and symbiosis. So anyway, a couple of years ago, late 2019, it was Christmas 2019, we traveled down to Tenerife, and we'd spend like a month down in Tenerife with the kids, and because the landscaping is kind of seasonal work anyway. And I can't be idle. I cannot be idle. So I started thinking about what I would like to do next. What do I want to do next? And so I started to make some phone calls. Because of my background and my upbringing, I've got this amazing, eclectic network of people all over the world that are in every kind of industry. Guys that I grew up with, and the people that they're an awesome bunch of people. Kids that grew up at the side of the road with nothing and no education, that have gone on to become multimillionaires and amazing people in their fields. Is really cool to see, because there were people that they've developed out of passion as opposed to education. I don't know if that makes any sense. But anyway, I started to dream up how could I make more of an impact? I can see that biodiversity is in free fall. And I can see the powers that be are trying to capitalize on it through their carbon markets. But what they're really doing is it's such a reductionist way of looking at it. And it's not helping the people that are at the coalface of this. It's just industry helping industry. And we've also got to understand that the whole economic paradigm that we live in, that whole fiat system, is in free fall now as well. And so they're scrabbling for ways to create a new, CBDC, central bank digital currencies, but these will be ones that I don't really know, to be fair, but I do know about the refi and how there are a lot of people working towards refi, and that really got me thinking. So how do we make sure that if we do, and we end up in this regenerative economy and this regenerative system, which I truly believe we will, how do we create mechanisms and systems that are going to make sure that the people that are at the coalface of this, as in people that are stuck in the poverty, conflict trap and land degradation, that they can benefit from this as well? And that's when I started to build the platform Gaia, which initially I was going to set it up as a charity that planted trees. But the more I looked into that, the more I realized that there was like serious issues with both those things. No offense to charities out there, and there's some awesome charities doing great work, but the model on its own is insufficient. We need to come up with new strategies here. And those strategies, as far as I can see, is ecopreneur, or it's a new term, isn't it? But, entrepreneur-led regeneration. And we can do it so much better. Like the platform GeoBlocks, which is kind of like the first of our tools from Gaia, is so transparent that you can see every step of the way. And if you actually do the math on it, Gaia takes 10 to 15% for doing these projects. It's actually, we're able to run these projects way more efficiently than a charity can run their projects. And that's just the proof of the pudding, So we need to catalyze the private sector to get moving in this space. And the more people work in this space, and the more we can get the momentum of this thing moving, then that's when the big guys start to come on board, and we can see movement in that space now. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. It was a good way to kind of bring us in here, bring us into how you came to this business. And you mentioned, and we talked about this earlier before we started our interview, but you mentioned that you never came from, you never went to school, right? But that, in my opinion, is false. Like you've been going to school this entire time, right? You've been learning from, people say, the school of hard knocks and whatnot, but you can tell that through your experiences, you've been able to meet people, you've been able to learn from the experiences that kind of brought you here. And I just wanted to talk about that for
every day is a school day.
Yeah, every day. It's when you have the mindset that you're, and sometimes it makes it easier when you're away from the school system to be able to open yourself up to the right type of education, to be a lifelong learner instead of being forced into this thought of school where I'm saying this as myself and my family have decided to unschool. We've homeschooled our entire parenting lives, my wife and I, but now we're stepping into an unschooling space, and I'm seeing some openings that I never thought I would see in my children, based on letting them dictate what they are going to learn and what they determine is their schooling or learning ability.
Like
right?
Sudbury. Have you come across the Sudbury schools?
Oh, so maybe explain.
Yeah, very, very cool. They're like democracy. They're like a democracy-led school. It's really cool. The kids decide what they want to do and what the curriculum is. Be interesting to see. A good friend of mine, he started one in West Cork. It'd be interesting to see. They could end up with a bunch of delinquents at the end of it, but you don't know.
You don't. Well,
I mean, you can end up with a bunch of delinquents out of the standard school system anyway. I mean, my mum always told me I was spared an education. I do think sometimes it can be. I'm obviously literate and I like to read, but I like to read the things I like to read. So that was cool. I mean, learned to read reading my dad's 2000 AD magazines, or I think The Hobbit was actually the first book I read, and I read it like 7 times and eventually got it. So yeah, thank you, Tolkien.
Yeah, right. What about learning your skill set for landscaping? Right, it kind of, you fell into that. How did you build an understanding and grow that understanding into this kind of biodiversity regenerative understanding, right? Because I see where that came from. And then also from that, you seem to have an interest in the economy system. How did you gravitate into that understanding and building into and find yourself attached to building solutions for it?
I think if you're able to think outside the box, and I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, because we all have it in us. I think that sometimes the education system, being so structured as it is, can create tunnel vision. And I know that's not everyone, obviously. I would never generalize. For my own part, how did I get into this? I like to think of it like this, okay? That consciousness comes from the universe, okay? And that thoughts and ideas are like neutrinos, the neutrinos, the God particles, and they're bombarding us all the time. And ideas come in waves. So around the same time as I was having this kind of awakening in the regen space, so was a lot of other people. You probably happened for you around 2019, 2020 as well, did it?
Yeah, this probably another form of it that happened. This kind of happened more around 2012. Well, let's see. 2012 was like my first introduction, and then there was a big, more upswelling in what I was doing right before COVID.
No, absolutely. There was, that this. I mean, obviously, we've been thinking in this about sustainability, or ecology, and we've been talking about this for a long, long time. But I think this next wave of it has come very much in the last 3 years, where there's a whole new wave of it has happened. And I mean, if you think about the invention of the light bulb or the radio, or there was loads of people working on that at that time. Isn't it amazing that these things all come at the same time and these people aren't connected? So I believe I was chosen is the wrong word, because that it's not chosen, selected in a way, that I was one of the people that got hit with this. And a lot of people, it will go and they'll go, oh, that's a really nice idea, and it'll pass over, or other people will drive at it 100% and they might not reach that point. And the reason so many of us are chosen, that is because, or is so many of us are selected in a way, consciously, we're all, we're selected, is because there's only going to be so many that make it, like little sperms. There's only going to be one two. Yeah. The race is on. The race is on. And this isn't, I see this as not, the beautiful thing about this is that everyone in this space, I can see very little in the way of competition here. I can see lots in the way of collaboration. And I think that's a real big mindset change here. That, you know, traditionally entrepreneur, you're like, I've come up with a really good idea. Now, how do I protect that idea and then ease out into the world under different things? Whereas in this regenerative space, we're going, hey, everyone, I've got this awesome fucking idea. How's it going to work? Can you collaborate? Can you use an aspect of it? Can I use an aspect of your platform? And so far, all I've got is, yeah, let's collaborate. Let's do this. Let's do the other. And it's a really free space to be in. It's a really free space because the people that are in it are all people that money isn't the driving factor here. You know, it's a passion for regeneration and it's a passion for starting a new system that's the driving factor here. And when money isn't the driving factor, I mean, look, we all need to put food on the table. I'm an entrepreneur myself and, you know, I haven't made a lot of money, but I've had an awesome life. The driving thing here is a passion to make a difference.
Right. I think you're totally correct in that. And that wave of people looking to make that change, it's a cultural change. It's an energy change that's happening. And I think you're right in the fact that we can all do more together in this type of transition towards regenerative systems than we ever possibly could with the extractive systems that we're moving away from. Right?
Absolutely, because this is more stakeholder. It really is, you know. And I hate to quote Uncle Klaus because I'm no fan of his, but you know what we do need is we do need to head towards stakeholder. You know, a stakeholder economy where all the different players have a stake in the outcome. And I think that's what's happening. I think it's going to happen anyway, regardless. I think the cat is out of the bag.
With the way that knowledge is these days too, we can get into these types of things more readily because we don't have these knowledge centers called schools anymore. We have the internet. We have ways of information, and we have access to information than we ever had before, which makes things like having a generalist more that's looking to solve problems is more beneficial than ever, right? Because what we need to see is connections to things, and a lot of times it's the generalist that has those understandings a little bit here, a little bit here, and a little bit here to be able to connect the dots. And what I'm seeing, Thomas, is like you've kind of stepped into these things because you had just a really rich experience of all sorts of different things in your travels, and that has helped you to make connections from more of a generalist. And I see the permaculture and regenerative and regenpreneur, the entrepreneurs within this kind of realm are more generalists than the more solving one problem for one, very niche area that you see in the world that a lot of the entrepreneurs have typically come from in the past, right? And I see that transition being a very healthy one for our world, our planet, and people, because we're not. You look at Walmart, right? And what's his name? Walton. What was the name of the founder of Walmart?
They were Waltons, weren't they?
Yeah, they were Waltons. But what was his first name?
Oh, I have no idea, mate. I have no idea. Okay. I know it's his granddaughter or something that owns it now.
Yeah. But you look at what he was trying to solve, like the problem that he was trying to solve. It was like in rural areas or in small towns, they didn't have access to all of the consumer big goods, right? They always had to like get it shipped in or whatever. And so he's like, well, I'm just going to build up these huge stores and supply chains and all these different things where I can serve those types of services. And so I'm going to put a Walmart in the middle of a small town, and it's going to make lots and lots of money because everybody's going to shop there and no one else is going to shop anywhere else. But he was looking at one small problem, like figuring out how people can get anything they ever wanted, right? Instead of what that meant for everything else around it, right? So he's solving this one problem, but then created so many other problems because of trying to solve for this one, right? Sam Walton, right? I think that's Sam's Club, right?
Probably an awesome dude, and didn't have any idea what it was going to grow into, you know?
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying is like the systems that our entrepreneurs were, I'm not giving Sam Walton or if I believe that's his name now that's coming to my head. I'm not giving any of them a hard time, and anybody that I don't want to judge or put any blame on one person. We all have to put our own blame where we feel.
Well, absolutely. This is what I say about people bashing the big corporates. Yes, a lot of these big corporate entities, they have got blood on their hands and they are liable, no doubt about it. But you have to understand that the people that are running these corporations right now, they've inherited this, and these corporations are very much connected into the old system of extraction and scarcity, and they've inherited that, and it's very hard for them to change that. And I know that I've spoken to people in high-ranking positions in corporates and banks, and they do want to change it. They say that legislation has to change in order to force their hand in a lot of cases, because when you're dealing with shareholders, for instance, and they're voting, if you're as a CEO of Cargill, for instance, and you stand up and you say, okay, we're going to stop deforesting, but it's going to affect the bottom line by X, Y, and Z, then those shareholders are going to say, okay, offer his head and elect someone new. So what we need to do is we need to engage these characters and show them that there is a new system, and if they keep on doing the old system, then they're set up for failure. Do they want to be the Blockbuster, or do they want to be the Netflix? And that's what we have to try and approach them with. And that's my approach here is, look, there's no point in bashing them. And also, it's very easy to say, no more oil, no more Cargill, no more bison. But you know what, man? What's going to happen tomorrow if these entities disappear is you're going to have no fuel, you're going to have no medicine, you're going to have no food. Because whether we like it or not, those systems are supporting certainly the Western world. But it's a whole misnomer that these big entities are feeding the world, because they're not. In fact, they're only feeding a small portion of the world. Most of the world is fed through subsistence, slash and burn. That's another big problem. So it's an entire system change, isn't it? It's not. So what I'm trying to get at here is, it's very easy to point the finger at the corporates, but it's the entire system that's the issue here. And I think that those corporates, if they were given the right system to implement, they would quite happily implement it in the morning, especially if it didn't affect their bottom line. And that's what we've got to look at here. We've got to make sure that we can keep the economic system afloat in whatever shape or form it is, and just transition it from extractive to regenerative. I mean, look, I don't know nuts and bolts of that beyond me. I'm not an economist, but I'm sure there's some really clever people in this space working to solve that problem.
Right. Well, and so it's people like you and I and other entrepreneurs that are kind of, because what Sam Walton and other entrepreneurs of that, they were still a part of that very extractive system. Especially during like the Green Revolution, where chemical pesticide and chemical fertilizer was like in its heyday, right? We were thinking of that type of system and trying to build it up and strengthen it in that at that point, right? And so understanding of that, what it would cause, wasn't really there yet, right? Because it hasn't caused as much harm as it is now, where it's almost blatantly where we can kind of see. But so starting with you and I and kind of catching the entrepreneur before we fall into these extractive systems is, I think, one of the strongest things that we could do. How do we work together to start the businesses of tomorrow, today, in using regenerative systems? And then I think those patterns can help the bigger corporations to transition, as you were saying, the old corporations get old and they fall. The old way of thinking kind of dies away, right?
The old guard,
exactly. So I think we kind of found ourselves in a fun conversation here, but I do want to kind of bring us back to your story, how we can take some takeaways from it as an entrepreneur trying to create something that's regenerative, building towards regenerative economies. What would you would you hope that the listener here who are regenerative entrepreneurs what would you hope that they would take away from your story?
I suppose a couple of things that were instilled in me as a child by my mum. She's an old Wicca witch, and she's a lovely old lady, and very wise. And she instilled two things in me, and she said the first one is the first law of acquisition is know what you want, and the second one is you're never too far down the wrong road to turn back. And I think these are really powerful messages, because here I am at 47, pulling the plug on a company that was earning a couple of $100,000 a year, and I was quite happy with that. To go on a complete whim to go out and start something completely new, because I'm driven by passion. And I think, yes, we have to use our heads and we have to crunch the numbers, but don't get caught up in it. Follow your heart, man. And also, this is a burgeoning space. And if you are an entrepreneur and you're heading out and you're right at the very start of your journey and you're thinking, what industry am I going to get into? If you're going to vest your time into the old extractive model, then you're wasting your time, mates. I'm telling you. What you need to do is you need to vest your time in the new regenerative model, because there's a couple of things. If the regenerative model doesn't work, it doesn't work, right? But the extractive model, even if you are able to get in there on the very last little bits and you're that person that's got the rights to the very last fucking tree, it's finished. It's finite. It's done. The extractive model is finished. The biodiversity that's left, the health that's left in it, the vigor that's left in it is like a seed. It's like the seed of Tao. That's what's left. What we have, we've got to nurture this. If we nurture this, this will create vast abundance. There will be more wealth and abundance made from regenerating her than we ever made destroying her. 100%, hands down. And I don't know that because I've read a load of books about it. I know that because that's what's in my heart. And that's it. And that's all I can say is follow your heart and obviously use your head. We need some good heads there, but you need to find the balance. It's all about equilibrium. Get out there, take your fucking shoes off, walk around, get the dirt between your toes, connect, meditate. Meditate.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We could take so many lessons from the experiences that you've shared with us today, and really want to let entrepreneurs keep on following your journey and reach out to you if they want to stay in touch and maybe partner with you on the work that you're doing. How can we do that? How do we follow what you're doing? How do we get in touch with you?
Okay, so just drop me a line, man. I talk to anyone. I'll make the time to talk to anyone. 100%. This is all about networking and connecting. And, whatever we have to bring to the table, it could be this little small part. It could just be an idea in the back of your head that's floating around. Mm-hmm. If you wake up thinking about it and it follows you around during the day and it's niggling at you, then you act on it. And if you're stuck in a fucking 9-to-5 job and you're stuck in a wage trap, you don't have to be stuck in that wage trap. You can walk away from it at any time. Go and live in a bender on the side of a mountain. I don't know. If people that are stuck in traps and I can't because I'm stuck in this trap, the trap is of your own making. That's all I can say. And that might sound like, well, that's easy for you to say because you live in a beautiful place. But to be fair, if it was gone in the morning, we'd only have to start again, and it would be an entirely new journey. Mm-hmm. You're never too far down the wrong road to turn back. And if people want to contact me, thomas@gaia.ie, they can find all my details there. The platform it's kind of, I like to say it's stuck together with gaffer tape and cable ties at the moment. But as of the 25th of this month, we go to Shindig Festival. Shindig Festival is supporting our first project, and it's all go from there.
Wonderful.
We're speaking to so many awesome people in so many different industries and spaces, and there's so much energy in this space. that honestly, if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about what to do with your time and your life, you're so blessed to be here right now, because never in the history of humankind have we had it so good or had so many opportunities. And not only that, but we can also look back in the not too distant future. It's happened right now. Our grandparents and our parents have seen the decline. The Industrial Revolution wasn't even a couple of hundred years ago. We've seen so much decline in the last couple of hundred years, and it's right there. And here we are. We're at the pinnacle of our civilization this time round. We're at the pinnacle of our civilization this time round, and we have all the tools, all the pieces are there. What we need is beautiful minds and hearts to come together now, and boom, let's evolve, man. Fucking evolution, not revolution. Yes, we are the regen generation. Let's get it on.
Yes.
Let's get it on, man. Yeah, 100%.
Thank you, Thomas. So we'll make sure to put your website and information, contact information in there. We really do want to keep on following your story. So as things progress, we're gonna bring you back, and we're gonna hear more of what's going on. Share with us how the platform's working and how we can integrate our work with yours as well. So thank you, Thomas, for all that you're doing.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you, Joshua.
All right, everybody, have a good day, and we will see you on the next episode of the Seeds of Tao podcast. Bye for now.
Nice one. Blessed be.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It really is a blessing and a pleasure to bring each episode to you. So what'd you think? If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review or follow us on the podcast platform of your choice. Each review really does help us to further the reach of this podcast and move our mission forward to build regenerative economies in every bioregion. If you have a suggestion or feedback for us, please let us know in the open and free Regenerative Business Economies Network, known as RegenBen, which is linked in the description and in the show notes of this episode. RegenBen also has an awesome community request form that allows you to suggest guests, register to be a guest on the podcast, and share your own regenerative entrepreneur startup story, or any other suggestion you may have for the community. Without your feedback and requests, this podcast and community wouldn't be what it is, so please let us know. Now, this may be bye for now, but remember, it doesn't end here. It has only just begun. The regenerative economies of the future start now with you.